Good afternoon. My name is Connie Dickinson, and I am very happy to be able to present our ongoing project to you today. The project is mainly concerned with adapting documentation materials for the community and the schools. Our program can be divided into three basic areas: creating materials for the bilingual schools, investigation and documentation of indigenous ecological knowledge and culture, and finding ways to make the documentation materials easily accessible to the community. Let's talk about the schools. Despite the fact that bilingual schools in Ecuador were first established over 30 years ago, most of the schools have little or no bilingual material, and most classes are taught in Spanish. The situation is complex. The core problem, of course, is lack of resources, mainly funding, materials, and trained teachers. But there are also social and political reasons for this lack of bilingual materials in classes. We don't presume to address all the problems that beset the bilingual schools, and we're certainly not going to tell the schools what or how they should teach, but we can work with the teachers to create materials that will hopefully provide useful resources for the educators. We are able to work closely with the schools at this time thanks to the support of Romulo Antun, the Secretaria de Educación Bilingue. With these goals in mind, in the past year we have distributed over 4,000 copies of 25 different talking books for 3 different communities. The first, and the community for which we have the most documentation material, is Tsafiki. Tsafiki is spoken in the western lowlands of Ecuador by approximately 3,000 people. The members of Pikitsa, the organization we work with, began documenting their language and culture over 40 years ago. So we have a huge amount of material for Tsafiki. And so far we've been able to create 4 beginning reader books and 10 traditional stories. All the stories have been illustrated by the Tsachi graphic artist Milton Calazacón. For the Shuar and the Wao, we've also created 4 beginning reader books. Now, we don't have hardly any documentation for Shuar, but Oscar Mandu and the high school students of Charapacocha have recorded, transcribed, and illustrated 3 traditional stories. So they now have 3 traditional storybooks. We've just began working with Wao Torero, but we already have 4 beginning reader books, and we're just about finished with the first traditional story. In addition, we have worked with the Shuar, the Yine of Peru, Andu, which is a language that is no longer spoken, Lowland Quichua, and other groups are requesting our aid. Our ability to do that will depend on funding and whether I want to sleep next year. We produce 2 categories of books: beginning reader books and books for the older students and adults. Most of these cultures do not have children's stories. Their traditional stories are like our Bible stories and are created for everyone, not just children. So we work closely with the bilingual teachers who request certain themes. We then adapt books from English and Spanish. We change the vegetation, the animals, the appearance of the humans, and often change the storyline so it is culturally appropriate. All the books are written only in the heritage language. We do this because most of the children and adults are more accustomed to reading Spanish than their own language. If we provide the Spanish, they will probably just read the Spanish. And I think when everything is always presented in Spanish, it sends a subtle message that Spanish is the more important language. We do have translations in English and Spanish for those who might need them. All the books have 2 QR codes. One code can be used with any phone that has an internet connection. The other QR code only works with phones we have formatted and can function without the internet. For this, we buy cheap used phones. After scanning the code, the user can listen and read along at the same time. All the books are laminated. It's a bit irritating. We spent hours creating these books, editing them, making sure the orthography is consistent, creating illustrations. But when we hand them to the teachers, their primary comment is, "You can clean it! You can clean it!" We don't yet know how effective or useful these books will be, and we won't know for another year or 2. The primary results are quite encouraging. The communities really welcome these materials. Some of the teachers almost cry because they finally have books. And the students look like ants descending on sugar. They really like these books. Now, I don't know if that initial enthusiasm is going to last or not. We won't know for another year or 2, but at least initially it looks good. We've also created cards, posters, and games with QR codes. For all the languages, for the preschool students, we've created cards concerning body parts and animals. The animal cards, when you scan the QR code, you hear the name of the animal and the vocalization of the animal. And we've also done this with the alphabet that is based on animals. Now with Tsafiki, we've created 2 games. One game based for very young children based on colors. It's a memory match game. And we've also created a memory match game for numeral classifiers. Tsafiki has numeral classifiers, and this system is quickly disappearing. So we feel like this game is important. Now for the Shuar and the Wow, we've also created 2 additional games. One is based on animal identification. We call it Who Am I? And another one based on animal tracks. Our second project concerns research using existing materials, as well as new investigations concerning indigenous scientific knowledge and culture. The lowland indigenous groups of Ecuador have a profound knowledge of the forest, but this knowledge is quickly being lost. In this program, high school students and interested adults investigate their own culture and then present the results in the program LexiPro. In some schools, this will be a requirement of graduation. To jumpstart this program, we've created hundreds of basic LexiPro pages concerning animals, birds, mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. These pages just contain basic information to positively identify the animal. It's the responsibility of the speakers to investigate and provide further information about the behavior, ecology, and cultural significance of the animal. I'm going to show you an example here because we found this document very useful for the identification of animals. We have templates for both the Upper Amazon region and the coastal Choclo area, which we would be happy to share if anyone is interested in using these materials. As you can see, this is just a standard LexiPro page. We start out with an illustration, and then of course up here, if you click on the chu, you can hear the word in Shuar.
Chu. Chu.
And then if you go down here, what you can see is the grammatical class of the word, a definition in Shuar, a definition in Spanish, English, and then down here, if you click on these, you can hear the vocalization of the animal. And as you can see here, the Shuar have already begun to indicate what each call means. When you're walking in the forest, it's important to know what the calls mean. And then we have several pictures of the animal down here. We have distribution. And then down here, the Shuar have begun to add their knowledge, their information about the animal. We also have a categories tab. And here, these are the animals that the Shuar eat, and these are the animals they don't eat. You can also look in English, and we have names as well as behavior. Here is a list of all the carnivores. Okay, and we also have the scientific names, so you can search for them by their scientific name. Okay, and here you can see we have this. Now, we have some 167 mammals that have been done here. We also have birds. Here you can see what we've done with the birds, which is basically the same. If you look here, you can hear the word in Shuar.
Amunti.
And we have a definition in Shuar, the Spanish, the English, the vocalization of the animal, and all the same information basically with the mammals. But it's the responsibility of the speakers to investigate, collect the information, and add it to these web pages. Now, one of the things we're doing with the large databases of Walterero and Tsafiki is we're making spell check dictionaries. It's very easy to do. You just make a custom dictionary in Word, load your data into Word, and add the words to the dictionary. It's incredibly boring, but you can do it while you listen to the news, listen to music, when you're on a plane. Now, we only have about 90,000 words in the Tsafiki spell check program right now, which is not nearly enough. Tsafiki is an agglutinative language. The verbs can take up to 17 suffixes, and many of those suffixes can occur in more than one slot in the verbal template. So it's not nearly enough, but it does have all the most common words, so it's useful. And one of the good things about it is a lot of the Tsachi are afraid to write because they're afraid of being criticized. And then what's nice about this program is if they use it and someone criticizes them, they can blame us. Or even better, they can blame the gringa. Okay, just really briefly, I'm going to show you another thing you can do if you have a lot of documentation. We have a 3 million word searchable Tsafiki database, which we're now using to create a comprehensive, basically learner's dictionary with lots of examples. Because we have such a large database, we are able to do searches for the word. We're able to look at the different connotations of the word, different meanings, and we're able to show how it's used. We're able to get lots of examples. It's often very hard to translate from these languages into Spanish or English, but if you have a lot of examples, the user can get an idea of what the word means by looking at the examples. Here we have one. Now, bare is a coverb. Coverbs are the largest class of words in Tsafiki. They basically are not verbs, they're not nouns, they're not adjectives, they're not adverbs. They combine with nominal classifiers to form nouns or adjectives, and they form with one of 34 verbs to make a verb. The Lexipro, so you can listen to it.
Bare.
You can also listen to a lot of the examples. Okay. If it occurs with a verb like ino, it means to stretch. And here you have a jaguar walking down the path stretching. Here it means short. Here it means long. Here it means to stretch something. If it occurs with a locative, it means far away, as here. Okay, here if it combines with a nominalizing suffix n, well, actually it's nasalization, it forms an adjective. If it occurs with tala, it indicates stripes, vertical stripes. And if it occurs with to, earth, it means far away, distant lands. Now, we're still editing this dictionary. Right now, it's a root dictionary, so we have about 4,000 roots. Each root has maybe 5 words on average underneath it. So we've got a dictionary now of about 20,000 words. We're editing the Spanish now, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because hopefully in a few months I'll be able to show you something that's completely edited and ready to go. Finally, I want to change the tone a bit. Years ago, I attended a conference where the big question was, what is documentation good for? I didn't think about it much at the time. I'm a functional linguist, so its value seemed obvious to me. But there was something else I should have thought about, but didn't. And that is simply that this material does not belong to us. It is not primarily for us. So we should neither be asking or answering that question. That became quite clear to me recently when I read Nemonte Nenkimo's book, where she briefly presents her and her brother's experience with documentation. You may have heard of Nemo. She is now an internationally recognized leader. But when I first met her, she had just undergone 7 very difficult years. Her brother Opie was working with me, recording, transcribing, and translating, and he recommended Nemo. So she became a core part of the Waorani documentation project. What she and Opie say about documentation in her book is both inspiring and terrifying. Inspiring because it's clear documentation does matter, and terrifying because it makes it clear we have a responsibility to get this material back into the hands where it belongs. But I'll let her convince you of that. Here are some snippets from the audio recording of her book, We Will Not Be Saved.
And the stories? They are also for your people, she said, recorded so they don't get lost. I looked down at the floor of the kitchen. Maybe this was what I needed, to just listen to my people's stories again, like I had when I was a child. Maybe there would be answers for me, for us. I was amazed at how many stories my brother had already recorded, stories that made me remember what I had forgotten. And each morning I put the headphones on and closed my eyes. I listened first, before transcribing anything, all the way until the end of the recording. I let my elders' voices carry me. Nanakawa spoke from his wheelchair in the village straight into my headphones. Oh, how I loved Nanakawa's laughter.